Picture this: you're working on Christmas Day, while families across America are unwrapping presents, sharing warm meals, and creating memories around twinkling trees. You're standing in a stadium corridor. The sounds of cheering fans echo through concrete hallways. Your feet ache. You've been on them for hours. This isn't how you imagined spending the holiday, but bills don't pause for celebrations, and someone has to keep the lights on, the crowds moving, the magic happening. You're just trying to get through your shift, counting down the hours until you can finally head home to whatever's left of the day. Then something unexpected happens. Something that changes everything. A woman walks toward you with a genuine smile that lights up her entire face. Not the polite, distant smile celebrities usually flash before rushing past. This one reaches her eyes. She stops right in front of you, looks directly at you like you're the only person in that massive stadium, and speaks words that make your heart skip. She thanks you. She wishes you a Merry Christmas. And then she hands you something that makes your hands tremble. $600. Cash. Real money that could buy groceries for weeks, cover an unexpected bill, or finally let you breathe just a little bit easier. This isn't a movie scene. This isn't some carefully orchestrated publicity moment with cameras capturing every angle for maximum social media impact. This is Taylor Swift, one of the biggest superstars on the planet, someone worth hundreds of millions of dollars, taking time out of her Christmas Day to personally acknowledge workers whose society usually treats as invisible. And this story, this beautiful moment of unexpected kindness, has sparked something powerful across the internet. It's reignited conversations about wealth, generosity, celebrity responsibility, and what it truly means to give from the heart. But more than that, it's revealed something profound about human nature itself, both the beautiful capacity for kindness and the unfortunate tendency some people have to criticize even the most genuine acts of compassion. Let's talk about what really happened at Arrowhead Stadium on that Christmas Day, because the story goes so much deeper than a simple cash gift. Taylor Swift wasn't obligated to be there in any official capacity beyond supporting her boyfriend Travis Kelce as he played for the Kansas City Chiefs. She could have stayed in a luxury suite, separated from the working staff by layers of security and privilege. She could have focused entirely on the game, on being photographed, on maintaining that carefully crafted celebrity distance that so many famous people use as armor against the world. Instead, she chose connection. She chose to see people. She chose to recognize the sacrifice that working on a major holiday represents. And that choice matters more than most people realize. Think about what Christmas means to most Americans. It's the one day of the year when almost everything shuts down. Stores close. Offices lock their doors. Even restaurants that normally stay open every other day of the year give their staff the day off. Families gather around tables loaded with food, exchanging gifts that took weeks to select and wrap. Children wake up at dawn, racing to see what Santa brought. Parents sip coffee and watch the chaos with tired, happy eyes. Grandparents settle into comfortable chairs, soaking in the warmth of having everyone together under one roof. It's a day when time seems to slow down, when the usual rush of modern life pauses just long enough for people to remember what matters most. Connection. Love. Presence. Being fully there with the people you care about. But for stadium workers, Christmas Day 2024 was just another shift. They woke up early, probably before the sun rose, and prepared for a long day on their feet. They kissed their kids goodbye, promising to be home as soon as they could. They drove through empty streets to Arrowhead Stadium, while the rest of Kansas City was still in pajamas. They clocked in, put on their uniforms, and got ready to serve tens of thousands of Chiefs fans who would pour through the gates in a few hours. These workers are the invisible infrastructure that makes professional sports possible. They scan tickets at entry gates, checking thousands of passes while maintaining security protocols. They serve hot dogs and nachos and beer at concession stands, working at lightning speed to keep lines moving. They clean bathrooms between waves of visitors, dealing with messes that most people don't want to think about. They guide crowds, answer questions, handle complaints, and somehow maintain pleasant attitudes even when fans get demanding or rude. Their jobs require physical stamina, emotional resilience, and the ability to stay professional under pressure. Stadium work isn't easy. It's standing for 8, 10, sometimes 12 hours straight. It's carrying heavy trays of food. It's climbing stairs again and again and again. It's dealing with drunk fans who get belligerent. It's working in cold weather when games happen during winter months, your fingers going numb as you try to scan tickets or count change. It's missing your own family celebrations so that other families can enjoy their traditions. And for most of these workers, the pay doesn't come close to compensating for the sacrifice. Stadium jobs typically offer hourly wages that hover around minimum wage or just slightly above it. No one's getting rich working concessions or security at sporting events. They're doing it because they need the income, because every paycheck matters when you're trying to keep a roof over your head and food on your table. So when Robin, one of these workers, found herself face to face with Taylor Swift on Christmas Day, her mind probably went through several stages of disbelief. First, the simple recognition. That's Taylor Swift. One of the most famous people on the entire planet is standing right in front of me. Then the confusion. Why is she talking to me? Celebrities don't usually interact with stadium staff. We're supposed to be invisible, part of the background. Then the processing of what Taylor was actually saying. She's thanking me. She's wishing me Merry Christmas. She's handing me something. What is this? And finally, the shock of looking down and realizing she was holding $600 in cash. Not a gift card. Not a voucher. Not a promise of something coming later. Cold, hard cash that she could use immediately for anything she needed. Robin later described having 8 children at home. 8. Think about that for a moment. 8 kids means 8 different personalities, 8 different sets of needs, 8 different wish lists for Christmas morning. It means stretching every dollar as far as it will possibly go. It means buying gifts on sale, comparing prices across stores, making tough decisions about what you can afford and what you have to skip this year. It means telling yourself that the kids will be happy with what they get, that love matters more than expensive toys, that you're doing your best even when your best feels like it's not quite enough. For a parent in that situation, Christmas can be as stressful as it is joyful. Yes, you love seeing your children's faces light up. Yes, you treasure the magic of the season. But underneath that joy runs a current of anxiety about money, about whether you've done enough, about whether your kids will feel disappointed when they compare their Christmas to what their friends received. So when Taylor Swift placed $600 in Robin's hands, she wasn't just giving money, she was giving relief, she was giving validation. She was giving a mother of 8 children the gift of breathing a little easier, of knowing that the unexpected car repair, or medical bill, or school expense that inevitably comes in January wouldn't immediately spiral into crisis. She was acknowledging that Robin's work had value, that her sacrifice of being away from her family on Christmas Day deserved recognition, that she mattered as a human being beyond just her function as a stadium employee. That acknowledgement, that moment of being truly seen by someone who had every excuse to remain distant and disconnected, might have meant even more than the money itself. Robin said she cried. Not just a few tears that she quickly wiped away, real crying. The kind that comes from somewhere deep inside when emotion overwhelms your ability to contain it. She cried because kindness like this is rare. She cried because someone with everything saw someone with much less and chose to bridge that gap. She cried because after a long day of serving others, someone had served her. She cried because it was Christmas, and she'd been trying to hold it together, to stay positive, to not think too much about what she was missing at home. And then, suddenly, this moment of grace crashed through all her defenses. She had to share the story. She felt compelled to let people know that Taylor Swift and Travis Kelce, these 2 people living at the absolute peak of fame and success, had treated her like she mattered. That they'd been genuinely kind, not fake celebrity kind, where you smile for cameras and then forget the person exists. Really, truly kind in a way that made her believe good people still exist, even at the highest levels of wealth and power. Her story spread across social media like wildfire. People shared it, commented on it, tagged their friends. The responses were overwhelmingly positive. Thousands of people celebrated Taylor's generosity, calling her an example of how celebrities should behave. They praised her for staying grounded despite her massive success. They thanked her for representing values that seem increasingly rare in a world obsessed with accumulation and status. For a beautiful moment, the internet did what it does best, when it's actually functioning as it should. It amplified a story of human goodness. It allowed people scattered across the country and around the world to share in a moment of joy. It reminded everyone, reading and commenting, that generosity is possible, that successful people don't have to be selfish, that there's still room for kindness in our often harsh and competitive culture. But then, because this is the internet we're talking about, another group of voices emerged. Not the majority, but loud enough to demand attention. These were the critics, the people who couldn't let a good story stay good, who needed to find something wrong with what had happened. Their complaint wasn't that Taylor had been unkind. They couldn't claim that. The facts didn't support it. Instead, they focused on the amount. $600, they said, wasn't enough. Not for a billionaire. Not for someone with Taylor Swift's level of wealth. She could have given more. She should have given more. In fact, some argued if she wasn't going to be truly generous relative to her net worth, she shouldn't have given anything at all. Better to give nothing, they suggested, than to give an amount they deemed insufficient. Let that perspective sink in for a moment. These critics were genuinely arguing that Robin and the other stadium workers would have been better off receiving $0 than receiving $600, simply because the amount didn't meet some arbitrary standard of generosity that these online commentators had invented. They weren't angry on behalf of workers who felt cheated or disappointed. Robin herself was thrilled. The criticism came from third parties who had contributed nothing, given nothing, helped no one, but felt entitled to judge exactly how much Taylor Swift should have distributed to people they'd never met. The entitlement embedded in that position is staggering. The idea that you can sit behind a keyboard, contribute nothing to a situation, and then criticize someone else for not being generous enough in precisely the way you think they should be, suggests a fundamentally broken understanding of how generosity works. True generosity is voluntary. It flows from the giver's desire to help, not from obligation or external pressure. The moment you start treating charitable giving as something you're entitled to judge and grade like a school assignment, you've missed the entire point. Generosity isn't a performance that others get to critique. It's a personal choice to share resources with people who have less, and the appropriateness of that sharing should be measured by its impact on the recipient, not by what percentage of the giver's total wealth it represents. $600 doesn't mean much to Taylor Swift's overall financial situation. That's true. Her net worth is substantial enough that $600 is essentially a rounding error in her accounting. But $600 means a tremendous amount to a stadium worker supporting 8 children. It's groceries for a month. It's catching up on a utility bill. It's replacing worn-out shoes for kids whose feet keep growing. It's having a small cushion when something unexpected happens, as things always do when you're living close to the financial edge. The critics seem to operate from a formula-based understanding of generosity. They appear to believe that wealthy people should give amounts that represent equal sacrifice relative to their total resources. So if a person earning $50,000 a year gives $50 to charity, representing 0.1% of their annual income, then a person worth $200 million should give $200,000 to achieve equivalent generosity. This mathematical approach to charitable giving sounds fair in abstract theoretical discussions, but it falls apart when applied to real human interactions. Taylor Swift wasn't implementing a wealth redistribution program calculated to ensure proportional giving. She was walking through a stadium, meeting workers, and spontaneously deciding to thank them with cash gifts. The amount she chose, $600, was significant enough to make a real difference in someone's life while being practical to distribute in the moment. Should she have carried envelopes with $10,000 each? $20,000? At what point would critics have been satisfied? And more importantly, why do they get to decide? The defenders of Taylor's actions pushed back hard against this criticism, and their arguments deserve attention because they reflect a healthier understanding of how generosity operates in the real world. They pointed out that Taylor was under no obligation to give anything. She's not the stadium's employer. She doesn't control worker wages or benefits. She was simply a person attending an event, and she chose to acknowledge the staff who made that event possible. That choice alone deserves recognition, not criticism. They also emphasized that $600 is real money with real utility. Dismissing it as insufficient because the giver could theoretically afford more ignores the actual positive impact it had on recipients' lives. Would more money have been even better? Sure. Is infinite money better than finite money? Obviously. But that's not how reality works. In the actual world we inhabit, $600 unexpected dollars represents genuine help for most American families. Treating it as inadequate reveals a disconnect from how most people actually live. Some defenders got even more pointed in their responses. They noted the absurdity of people who've given nothing criticizing someone who gave something. If you're sitting on your couch having donated $0 to stadium workers, having made zero effort to improve their lives, having contributed zero value to their Christmas Day experience, then perhaps you're not in the best position to judge someone who actually helped. The critics weren't offering constructive suggestions about how to better support underpaid workers. They weren't organizing fundraisers or advocating for living wages or doing anything productive. They were simply complaining that someone else's generosity didn't meet their invented standards. That kind of criticism serves no purpose except to make the critic feel morally superior without actually requiring them to do anything helpful. The conversation gradually shifted back toward positivity as more reasonable voices drowned out the critics. People started sharing their own stories of times when unexpected money had made huge differences in their lives. A single mother remembered when a stranger paid her grocery bill when her card was declined, saving her from the humiliation and stress of that moment. A college student recalled receiving an anonymous scholarship that made continuing their education possible. A family described how a church's emergency fund helped them avoid eviction during a particularly difficult month. These stories illustrated a simple truth that the critics seemed to have forgotten. Money isn't just abstract numbers. It's security, opportunity, breathing room, and hope when you're struggling financially. Even modest amounts can transform your circumstances in ways that wealthy people might not fully understand because they've never experienced that particular kind of stress. What makes Taylor Swift's stadium generosity even more meaningful is that it wasn't an isolated incident. This wasn't the one time she did something nice and then went back to ignoring regular people. Her pattern of generosity stretches back years and encompasses millions of dollars in donations to causes addressing real human needs. Just weeks before the stadium story went viral, Taylor had quietly donated massive sums to organizations that literally save lives and feed hungry families. She gave $1 million to Feeding America, the nation's largest domestic hunger relief organization. That single donation will help feed thousands of families facing food insecurity across the country. Think about what that actually means. Not in abstract terms, but in real human terms. That's kids going to bed with full stomachs instead of lying awake feeling hungry. That's parents not having to choose between buying groceries and paying rent. That's elderly people on fixed incomes being able to eat nutritious meals instead of stretching insufficient resources across too many days. $1 million translates into countless individual moments of relief, nourishment, and dignity for people who are struggling through no fault of their own. She also gave $1 million to the American Heart Association, funding research and programs focused on cardiovascular health. Heart disease remains the leading cause of death in America, killing more people than all forms of cancer combined. But unlike some other major health threats, many heart problems are preventable or treatable when caught early. The American Heart Association works to educate the public about heart health, fund cutting-edge research into better treatments, provide screening programs in underserved communities, and train healthcare providers in the latest life-saving techniques. Taylor's donation supports all of that work. It contributes to research that might lead to breakthrough treatments. It helps fund screening programs that catch problems before they become fatal. It supports education initiatives that teach people how to recognize warning signs and seek help in time. In very real terms, her donation will extend lives and prevent suffering for countless individuals who will never know that Taylor Swift played a role in their survival. And she didn't stop there. Taylor also made a substantial donation to Billionaire, a program that provides a safety net for musicians facing personal, medical, or financial crises. This contribution hits particularly close to home because it supports people working in the same industry where Taylor found her own success. The music business is notoriously unstable for most of the people working in it. For every Taylor Swift who achieves massive commercial success, there are thousands of talented musicians who struggle to make ends meet. Session players who can't afford health insurance. Songwriters whose royalties dried up as the industry changed. Aging performers whose bodies can no longer handle the physical demands of touring. Background singers dealing with unexpected medical emergencies. Sound engineers who lost work during industry upheavals. These are skilled professionals who dedicated their lives to music, but they don't have the financial security that success brought to Taylor. By supporting Billionaire, she's essentially looking out for her colleagues and peers who need help, using her resources to provide stability for people working in an inherently unstable field. What's particularly remarkable about these major donations is how quietly they happened. There were no press conferences announcing Taylor's charitable giving. She didn't call reporters to document the moment she signed the checks. She didn't post lengthy Instagram captions explaining her donations and encouraging her hundreds of millions of followers to praise her generosity. The information emerged through the organizations themselves acknowledging their donors or through careful reporting by journalists covering philanthropic giving. Taylor herself rarely discusses her charitable work in interviews or public statements. She doesn't use her generosity as a talking point during album promotions. She doesn't reference her donations when defending herself against criticism. She simply gives because she believes in the causes and wants to help, then moves on to the next thing without seeking applause or recognition. This low-key approach to charitable giving reveals something important about Taylor's character and motivations. Plenty of celebrities give to charity, but many of them make sure everyone knows about it. They bring camera crews to document their volunteer work. They post constant social media updates about their charitable foundations. They mention their giving in every interview. They accept awards for their philanthropy at ceremonies that generate additional publicity. There's nothing inherently wrong with that approach. Public charitable work can inspire others and draw attention to important causes. But it does raise questions about motivation. Are these celebrities giving because they want to help? Or are they giving because they want to be seen as helpful? Are they supporting causes they care about, or are they performing generosity for public relations benefits? Taylor's tendency toward quiet giving suggests someone motivated by the desire to make actual differences rather than to generate positive publicity. When you donate millions of dollars without telling anyone about it, you're not getting maximum PR value from your charitable work. You're simply helping. The distinction matters because it speaks to authenticity. Authentic generosity focuses on impact. It asks whether the donation will help the cause and improve people's lives. Performative generosity focuses on perception. It asks whether the donation will enhance the giver's public image and generate positive coverage. Both types of giving can produce good outcomes, but only authentic generosity maintains its motivation, even when no one's watching. Taylor's pattern of giving suggests someone who would continue supporting causes even if she received zero recognition for it, because the point is the help itself rather than the credit for helping. So when critics pop up online complaining that Taylor's $600 gifts to stadium workers weren't generous enough, they're betraying their ignorance of her broader pattern of charitable giving. This is the same woman who regularly writes million-dollar checks to organizations addressing hunger, health, and hardship. She's not penny-pinching her generosity. She's not carefully calculating the minimum acceptable amount she can give to satisfy public expectations. She's actually being extraordinarily generous by any reasonable standard. Her net worth, estimated at around $220 million, or possibly more depending on how you calculate various assets and earning potential, places her among the wealthiest entertainers in the world. But unlike many people at that level of wealth, she doesn't treat her money as something to be hoarded and protected from all outside claims. She treats it as a resource that can and should be used to make positive differences in the world. This approach to wealth stands in stark contrast to how many extremely rich individuals operate. The world is full of billionaires who've accumulated almost unimaginable fortunes and then built walls around that wealth, doing everything possible to avoid taxes, minimize charitable giving, and pass maximum amounts to their heirs. They live in gated compounds, travel by private jet, vacation on private islands, and generally exist in bubbles completely separated from how normal people live. They lose touch with the fact that most humans struggle with basic necessities like housing, healthcare, and food security. Their wealth becomes abstract, just numbers in investment accounts growing larger through compound interest and smart asset allocation. The human impact of that wealth, the actual power it represents to alleviate suffering and create opportunity, gets lost in the pursuit of accumulating even more. Taylor Swift seems to have avoided that trap entirely, despite achieving massive financial success at a young age, despite being surrounded by the trappings of wealth and fame for most of her adult life. She's somehow maintained awareness that money is ultimately just a tool. Its value lies not in the accumulation itself, but in what it enables you to do and the impact it allows you to have. She flies private jets, yes. She owns beautiful homes in multiple cities. She has access to luxuries that most people can only dream about. But she also writes million-dollar checks to food banks and hands cash to hourly workers. She maintains both the privileges of wealth and the responsibilities that should accompany it. That balance is harder to achieve than it might seem. Because wealth has a way of insulating people from the realities of economic struggle and creating environments where everyone around you is also wealthy, making it easy to forget that most of the world lives very differently. The debate surrounding her Christmas gifts to stadium workers reveals something uncomfortable about our cultural relationship with wealth and inequality. We've created a society with staggering wealth gaps where some individuals control resources equivalent to the combined wealth of millions of average families while other people work full-time jobs and still can't afford basic necessities. These gaps have been growing for decades as wages stagnated for most workers, while incomes for the top 10%, top 1%, and especially top 0.1% skyrocketed. The result is an economic reality where billionaires exist alongside people who can't afford emergency room visits, where private jets share airspace with families doubling up in small apartments because neither household can afford rent alone. These disparities create obvious moral questions about fairness, justice, and social responsibility. But instead of addressing the systemic issues that create such extreme inequality, we tend to focus our attention on individual acts of charity. We praise wealthy people who give generously and criticize those who don't. We create informal social expectations that rich individuals should donate substantial portions of their wealth to worthy causes. We celebrate when billionaires sign pledges promising to give away most of their fortunes before they die. All of this emphasis on charitable giving treats inequality as something to be managed through voluntary action by wealthy individuals rather than as a structural problem requiring collective solutions. It's easier and more emotionally satisfying to praise Taylor Swift for giving money to stadium workers than to grapple with why stadium workers need unexpected cash gifts to make their budgets work in the first place. It's simpler to criticize billionaires for not giving enough than to question economic systems that enable individuals to accumulate billions while millions struggle. These systemic questions matter enormously and deserve serious attention from policymakers, economists, and citizens. Should we have a minimum wage high enough that full-time workers can afford housing, food, healthcare, and other necessities without requiring government assistance or charitable support? Should we tax wealth more aggressively to fund public programs that help everyone? Should we strengthen labor unions and worker protections to ensure that economic gains are shared more broadly? These questions about economic structure and policy don't have simple answers, and reasonable people disagree about the best approaches. But they're the questions that actually matter if we care about reducing inequality and ensuring everyone can live with dignity and security. Taylor Swift's generosity doesn't solve systemic problems, and she would probably admit that freely if asked. Individual charitable giving, no matter how generous, can't replace functional social safety nets, fair wages, and economic policies designed to share prosperity broadly. But within the system we currently have, within the economic reality that actually exists, rather than the one we might wish for, her actions represent something valuable. She's using her privileged position to share resources with people who have less. She's acknowledging the human beings whose labor supports the industries that made her wealthy. She's modeling a version of success that includes looking out for others rather than just maximizing your own accumulation. And she's doing it in ways that center the recipient's dignity rather than her own glory. That last piece, the focus on maintaining dignity for the people she helps, distinguishes thoughtful generosity from the kind that inadvertently demeans recipients. Some charitable giving, even when well-intentioned, creates uncomfortable power dynamics where recipients must perform gratitude and share personal struggles publicly to receive help. Television shows that surprise deserving families with extreme home makeovers require those families to share their most painful stories on camera for entertainment. Charity campaigns that feature photos of suffering children in developing countries raise money by essentially exploiting those children's images. Even individual acts of giving can go wrong when the giver makes a big public show that puts recipients in positions where they have to gush with thanks for audiences. These approaches treat charity as transaction, something given in exchange for entertainment value, positive feelings for the giver, or public displays of gratitude from recipients. Taylor's approach appears refreshingly different. When she handed envelopes to stadium workers, she did it quietly without cameras or announcements. She wasn't making them perform for the money or share their personal struggles to prove they deserved help. She simply gave, acknowledged their work, wished them well, and moved on. The fact that some recipients later chose to share their experiences on social media came from their own desire to tell the story, not from any requirement or expectation Taylor imposed. That respect for recipient dignity matters, because it acknowledges that being in a position to need help doesn't make you less deserving of privacy and autonomy. You can provide financial assistance while still treating people as equals who deserve respect, rather than as objects of charity who should be grateful for any scraps they receive. The stadium workers weren't selected through some application process where they had to prove their worthiness. Taylor didn't investigate their financial situations or require them to demonstrate sufficient need. She simply decided that people working on Christmas Day deserved recognition and thanks, so she gave thanks along with money. That universal approach, helping everyone doing particular work, rather than trying to identify the most deserving individuals, has its own dignity. It avoids the uncomfortable process of sorting people into categories of deserving versus undeserving, worthy versus unworthy. Everyone working that day made sacrifices. Everyone deserved acknowledgement, so everyone received it, simple, clean, and respectful. This brings us back to the question of what we should actually expect from wealthy celebrities regarding charitable giving. Should they be held to higher standards than average people? Should we demand that they give certain percentages of their wealth to causes we deem important? Should we criticize them when their giving doesn't meet our expectations? These questions don't have obvious answers because they involve competing values and principles. On one hand, individuals should have freedom to make their own choices about their resources without facing constant judgment from others. On the other hand, extreme wealth arguably creates moral obligations to help address societal problems, especially when that wealth was accumulated through systems and infrastructures paid for by everyone's tax dollars and labor. A reasonable middle position might be that we should celebrate genuine generosity when we see it, while also being honest about the fact that individual charity can't solve systemic problems. Taylor Swift deserves recognition for giving millions to important causes and for treating regular workers with respect and kindness. Those actions are genuinely good and worthy of praise. At the same time, we shouldn't let feel-good stories about celebrity charity distract us from harder conversations about fair wages, economic justice, and structural inequality. Both perspectives can coexist. We can appreciate Taylor's generosity while also working towards systems where stadium workers earn enough that they don't depend on celebrity windfalls to make their budgets work. The critics who complained about Taylor's $600 gifts likely weren't thinking through these nuances. They were reacting emotionally to a perceived imbalance, noticing that $600 means something very different to a billionaire than to a worker, and concluding that the amount was therefore insufficient. But their emotional reaction missed important context about Taylor's broader pattern of giving, about the voluntary nature of her gift, about the actual positive impact on recipients, and about the unreasonableness of expecting every charitable interaction to be perfectly calibrated to the giver's total wealth. Their criticism, though it generated engagement and controversy online, ultimately contributed nothing positive to anyone's life. It didn't help stadium workers. It didn't advance important conversations about economic justice. It just created negativity around a story that was fundamentally positive. That tendency to find fault with good things represents one of social media's most frustrating features. Platforms that connect billions of people and enable instant sharing of information also create environments where criticism is easy, engagement is rewarded regardless of quality, and negativity often spreads faster than positivity. Someone can spend 5 seconds writing a dismissive comment about how Taylor Swift should have given more money, post it without any research or reflection, and potentially reach thousands of people who see that criticism and let it color their perception of the story. Meanwhile, the people doing actual good work, actually helping others, actually making sacrifices to improve the world, receive a fraction of the attention that critics get. The incentive structures are backwards, rewarding hot takes over thoughtful analysis and punishing public generosity with demands that it be even more generous next time. If we want to build a culture that encourages generosity rather than discouraging it, we need to be thoughtful about how we respond to acts of giving. Knee-jerk criticism that focuses on what wasn't given rather than what was given creates environments where wealthy people conclude that charitable giving isn't worth the hassle because they'll face criticism regardless of how much they give. Why donate $10 million if people will just complain you didn't give $20 million? Why hand out cash to workers if strangers online will calculate that you could have given more? The easier path is to just not give publicly at all, to keep your charitable work completely private, or to simply not engage in charitable work period and avoid the whole complicated dynamic. Some celebrities have moved in exactly that direction, giving less openly or not at all specifically because of the criticism they've received. That would be a tragic outcome. Because for all the limitations of individual charitable giving, it does make real differences in people's lives. The $1 million Taylor Swift gave to Feeding America will feed people who would otherwise go hungry. That matters. The $600 she gave to Robin will help that family with 8 children make it through a tough financial period. That matters. The cumulative impact of thousands of generous acts by hundreds of wealthy individuals adds up to billions of dollars supporting causes that need support. We don't have to pretend that this charitable giving solves all problems or eliminates the need for better economic policies to still recognize that it helps real people in tangible ways. Both things can be true simultaneously. Moving forward, perhaps the healthiest approach is to celebrate generosity when we encounter it while continuing to push for structural changes that address root causes of inequality. We can praise Taylor Swift for her charitable giving without pretending it solves poverty. We can acknowledge that $600 made a meaningful difference for stadium workers without claiming it's sufficient response to the broader issue of wage stagnation. We can appreciate individual acts of kindness while still insisting on collective responsibility for ensuring everyone has access to necessities. These positions aren't contradictory. They're complementary perspectives that together create a more complete picture of how we might build a more just and compassionate society. And we can certainly stop criticizing people for giving amounts we've decided aren't enough when we ourselves have given nothing. That seems like a bare minimum standard for participating in conversations about charitable giving. If you haven't contributed to a cause, if you haven't volunteered your time, if you haven't made any personal sacrifice to help others, then perhaps you should be slower to judge those who have. This doesn't mean wealthy people are above criticism. It doesn't mean we can't have broader conversations about economic responsibility and fair distribution of resources. It just means that specific acts of documented generosity probably shouldn't be met with complaints that the giver should have given more. That response serves no good purpose and potentially discourages future giving. The story of Taylor Swift's Christmas generosity at Arrowhead Stadium ultimately tells us more about ourselves than about her. Our reactions to her gifts reveal our values, our assumptions about wealth and poverty, our beliefs about what rich people owe to society, and our capacity for either gratitude or endless criticism. Some people saw the story and felt happy that workers received unexpected help. Others saw the same story and felt angry that they didn't receive more. Those different reactions stem from different worldviews, different relationships with money and fairness, different levels of empathy or cynicism. Neither reaction is necessarily wrong, but one creates more positivity in the world while the other creates division and resentment. If we want more generosity in the world, we should probably celebrate it when it appears rather than immediately calculating whether it meets standards we invented. If we want wealthy people to share their resources rather than hoarding them, we should probably thank them when they do rather than complaining it wasn't enough. If we want celebrities to stay connected to regular people rather than retreating into isolated bubbles of privilege, we should probably appreciate when they make genuine efforts to connect, rather than dismissing those efforts as insufficient. These aren't complicated principles. They're basic human dynamics about encouragement versus criticism, about positive reinforcement versus punishment, about creating environments that bring out people's better natures versus environments that make generosity feel like a trap. Taylor Swift will be fine regardless of how people respond to her charitable giving. She has enough money, enough success, enough insulation from criticism to weather any online controversy, but the rest of us are shaped by the cultural norms we collectively create. If we build a culture that celebrates generosity and treats kindness as aspirational, we'll likely see more of both. If we build a culture that picks apart every good deed looking for flaws and insufficient amounts, we'll likely see people retreat from public giving altogether. The choice is ours to make through millions of individual comments, shares, and conversations that collectively define what behaviors get rewarded and what behaviors get punished in our public discourse. The silver moon illuminates surface, calm lick Swede shows Christmas gifts have their own perspective on all of this, and perhaps that perspective matters most. They know what those $600 meant to their families. They know whether the gesture felt genuine or calculated. They know how it affected their Christmas and their financial situations. And from everything they've shared, they felt blessed, seen, valued, and helped. That's what actually happened in the real world, beyond internet debates. Real people received real help from someone who chose to share resources she didn't have to share. Everything else is just noise from people who weren't there, didn't give anything, and feel entitled to judge anyway. Maybe it's time we learn to tell the difference between signal and noise, between substance and performance, between people who are trying to make the world better and people who are trying to feel superior by criticizing those efforts. The workers at Arrowhead Stadium on Christmas Day don't need internet strangers defending them from insufficient generosity. They're grateful for what they received, and that gratitude tells you everything you need to know about whether Taylor Swift's gifts were meaningful. Sometimes the simplest measure of generosity is whether it helped the person who received it. By that measure, her Christmas kindness was a complete success.